Welcome. Welcome to the Agoura Hills City Council Budget Workshop. This meeting is being conducted in person in the council chambers and also by utilizing video conferencing. Please silence all cell phones and other electronic devices and do not access Zoom during the live meeting as it will cause interference with the audiovisual system in the council chambers. Tonight's meeting will be viewed on Zoom via the link on the agenda by live stream on YouTube by entering Agoura Hills City Council meeting in your browser and clicking on the link for June 14th, 2023, or view the live or archive meeting on the city's website at agourahillscity.org and click on the Watch Meetings Online button. I will now defer to the city clerk.
Thank you, Mayor Anstead. Public comments are limited to the discussion item on tonight's agenda. Any person in the council chambers who wishes to speak or submit a written comment is requested to complete a comment card for each item and submit to the city clerk prior to the public comment portion of the item. Comments submitted at the meeting will be provided to the city council for review and filed with the official record. For any person participating remotely, written public comments were requested to be emailed by 2 p.m. today and distributed to the city council in advance of the meeting. To request to speak during public comment, please click on the raise hand button on the Zoom toolbar. Request to speak must be received prior to the mayor closing the public comment portion of the item. Public testimony for all speakers is limited to 3 minutes per speaker. Written public comments will not be read aloud by the city clerk. For full details, please refer to the public participation section on the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you. I will now call the meeting to order, and I will defer to Councilmember Sylvester for the Pledge of Allegiance. I will now defer to the city clerk for a roll call vote.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Councilmember Lopez?
Here.
Councilmember Sylvester?
Here.
Councilmember Wolf?
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Buckley Weber?
Here.
Mayor Anstead?
Here.
Mayor Anstead, you have a quorum.
Thank you very much. We'll now move to the approval of the agenda. Will the maker of the motion and second to approve the agenda please state your names? We have two.
This is Deborah Klein-Lopez. I'll make a motion to approve tonight's budget agenda.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Mayor Pro Tem Buckley Weber seconds the motion.
Thank you. I'll now defer to the city clerk for a roll call vote.
Councilmember Lopez?
Aye.
Councilmember Sylvester?
Aye.
Councilmember Wolf?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Buckley Weber?
Aye.
Mayor Anstead?
Aye.
Mayor Anstead, you have approval 5-0.
Thank you very much. We'll now move to public comments. This section is reserved for public comments relating to the budget workshop, including any public comments relating to the community grants. Written public comments were requested to be emailed in advance of tonight's meeting. If you wish to speak, please click the raise hand button on the Zoom toolbar now. Public testimony is limited to 3 minutes per speaker, and the speaker's time may not be transferred to another speaker. I'll now defer to the city clerk for public comments.
Thank you, Mayor Anstead. No written public comments have been received and no speaker cards have been submitted. I'll now defer to staff for any remote participants. Amber?
Good afternoon. Thank you, Mayor Anstead. No hands are raised to speak on this item.
Awesome. For our next item is discussion action item for the fiscal year 2023-24 and 2024-25 preliminary budget review. I will now defer to the city manager, Nate Hamburger, for the staff presentation.
Good afternoon, Honorable Mayor and council members. This afternoon we are going to go through our final budget workshop for the 2-year budget. And this is a preliminary, and it's just for the public's sake. This is something that we start in January. We've had multiple meetings, different input from all of our departments and the council, and I appreciate all of your time and effort and everybody that's worked on this, particularly Ms. Trulson and her staff, to get this budget in the place that we're at today, and so I feel very good about presenting that today to you. And then I'm going to go over just real quick on the next slide, just our agenda for this afternoon. I will turn it over to Ms. Trulson in just a minute to go over all of the budget items and the policy updates that we have. We'll offer the Finance Subcommittee an opportunity to share any comments that they had in their review. And then the final thing we'll have is a community grant discussion, and we'll do that. And then the goal is to finalize, take any feedback and that, finalize the budget to present to you at your next meeting on the 28th, and consider adoption of the two-year budget. So with that, I will turn it over to our Director of Finance, Ms. Strolson.
Good afternoon, Honorable Mayor, members of the City Council. Today I'm going to go first quickly over a PowerPoint with you, and that'll be the high-level overview of the budget, and then we'll pause the PowerPoint in reviewing the actual document itself. Since this is a budget workshop format, feel free to ask questions throughout the presentation, although specific questions about line items will be easier to address when we're actually reviewing the budget document. So with that, the first overview is of the city revenues. The general fund is where the city receives discretionary spending for things like the sheriff bills, community events, local ordinances, landscape. This slide shows the total anticipated general fund revenues in 2023-24 and 2024-25. The general fund depends on three large revenue sources: property tax and sales tax, which are projected by consultants hired by the city, and transient occupancy taxes. The transient occupancy taxes are harder to project because they're based upon use of the hotels, and to be conservative, we've budgeted them flat. So as you can see in that bottom line, the first year of the budget, we're anticipating about $20.5 million in general fund revenues. In the second year of the budget, 20.9, almost $21 million, so just a slight increase. This slide shows all the anticipated revenues of the city budget: $39 million for 23-24, and then $33 million for 24-25. The single largest revenue source for the city is property taxes, and we previously discussed them. They are budgeted to increase about 5% in 23-24, and slightly less than that in 24-25. So if you look down the line right after property taxes, the next line shows Measure R capital projects. And in 23-24, that's anticipated to be a $5.6 million revenue. But in 24-25, it's only $25,000. And that's because this is a grant reimbursement. We're planning to use this, the Measure M, and the state-specified grant money primarily for the linear park and a few other improvements along the Canaan corridor. And so the grant, all those grants that we have is what makes that fluctuation go from $39 million to $33 million, because we don't have as many anticipated grants in the second year. So next we'll do a overview of expenditures, focusing on the general fund and then reviewing the detail of the rest of the budget. This slide shows the planned expenditures in the general fund for 2023-24. Please note that the city has budgeted 30% of the general fund expenditures to be spent on public safety. That's $5.6 million and a 7.63% increase over the current year. The general government line includes insurance for the city, like liability, workers' comp, as well as the cost of operating all the facilities and maintaining landscaping throughout the community. In 24-25, the planned expenditures of $19.4 million are broken down pretty much the same as in 23-24. Public safety is $5.8 million, with a planned increase of 4%. And this increase is just an estimate based on an average increase for past years. The third component of the budget is reserve levels. The city has a policy to present a balanced budget, which means that operating revenues fully cover operating expenditures, including debt. In accordance with the policy, the city has prepared a balanced budget. In 2005, the city passed a resolution that stated that the general fund should have a reserve that is equal or greater than 40% of the operating budget, including transfers. And if we can just hold that slide, we'll describe this chart. This chart, which is graphed from 2016-17 to 24-25, shows the general fund reserve balance. During the pandemic, that reserve balance dropped to only $8.3 million, and it wasn't all cash. And then it went up again in 21-22 because the city received American Rescue Plan Act money to reimburse us for the cost of operations during the pandemic. This reserve is used to fund daily operations because the city pays bills like water, salaries, sheriff costs monthly, but receives most of its revenues in monthly or biannual payments. And to pay emergency costs like the Woolsey fire or the economic downturn, we rely on these reserves. This reserve balance should be, according to the council policy, $8.3 million at the end of the 2 fiscal years. In this graph, the general fund is projected to be $14.1 million, or 68% of expenses and transfers. But before we plan on that being a little too large, I do want to say it's not all cash. So on the next slide, I broke down how that reserve is made up of. So the $14 million, the dark green, is the cash reserve that the city has for its operations. That's that 40% we talked about that we need just to make things operate within the city. The dark blue line is the about $1.1 million that the city has above the operational reserve. This could be used for future projects, unanticipated needs, things that we haven't planned for. Then that light tan is the amount that the city is owed from grants. So when the city builds grant-based projects like Agoura Road, which has been finished for quite a while, we spend the money and then we receive the grant. And the money is not all available until the grant is finalized, which unfortunately, just due to the way the grant process works, can be several years. So I just wanted to show you, now we're up, next slide, that's right. Now we're down to, at the end of 23-24, the anticipated cash that we would have is about $9.3 million, only about $1 million more than the 40% needed to fund operations. So the City Council has done a phenomenal job of planning this out, breaking it down, and making sure that we meet operations and have just the right amount of cash to do what we need to do. So thank you. And then this brings us to an update about the use of reserves and planned expenses. So on the next slide, as the city has planned to construct a linear park using $16.9 million in various grants. Each of these grants require the city to spend first and be reimbursed 60 to 90 days later, with 5% or so withheld until the project is completed and audited. The first expenditures could be up to $6 million in a short period of time, and Public Works knows better how that works than I do. But the most important thing here is since the city is only projected to have that $9.3 million in cash reserves, we need to explore other short-term financing options. These include bank loans and bonds. Staff has been working with a financial advisor and bond attorneys to figure out the lowest cost, the most conservative approach, and the best way to complete the project. And as the project becomes a reality, staff will report back to the council with updates and to let you make decisions on what the best financing options would be for the city. After completion of the budget, but prior to bringing it forward, a few items relating to the Agoura Hills Calabasas Community Center were brought to staff's attention. The city received a $1 million grant for improvements at the AHCCC. This grant is a federal grant with strict compliance requirements for purchasing and payroll and all sorts of fun stuff. And staff is recommending that a consultant be obtained for $30,000 in each year to assist with that compliance. Additionally, the city may need to contribute $7,500 towards the cost of the AHCCC for the audit and other possible insurance costs. These costs are being worked out with, some of the costs are still being negotiated with CJPIA and aren't exactly known, but we wanted to make sure we made you aware of it, because if it needs to be paid, it would have to be paid right in the beginning of July. And the AHCCC is meeting right at the very end of June to set their budget, so the timing is going to be really quick. So that being said, let me show you the next slide so you can see where what we have in the budget to do this with. Without the AHCCC adjustments, the city is projected to have $178,591 in net income for 23-24 and $212,229 in 24-25. So that's going into that reserve bucket we talked about. And on the next slide, so if we take away those additional proposed expenses, we are still budgeted with a proposed net income just slightly to the good. And staff would like to seek direction from the City Council on the proposed adjustment for the consultant and for the contribution to the AHCCC for a total of $37,500 in 23-24 and $30,000 in 24-25.
Can I ask a question while we're on that? Mr. Mayor, is that okay if I ask the question now?
Yes.
Can you explain to me, what exactly is the consultant's job?
The consultant's job would be better, is Amy's over there making a big smile. Amy can better explain everything
Thank
this
you.
consultant needs to do.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and council members. The consultant is going to assist the general contractor in complying with all the federal requirements for the grant. The grant is through the HUD, Housing and Urban Development. And as we know, federal grants have a lot of requirements. So to ensure that the city is in compliance, we are contracting out. We'd like to contract out with our consultant who assists us with the CDBG projects.
Thank you.
And one more question. Are we splitting that with Calabasas?
We are not splitting that with Calabasas. This is on our side for the grant that the city got.
I see.
I mean, the thought process could be that they're incurring costs on their side with the roof. If we remember, they're adding to the total cost of the roof construction. So we haven't discussed if that's something that we would ask them to split with us. I think it was that we would use them to assist our staff in implementing the grant on our end.
Okay.
Any other questions on that item, on that specific, so we get all, go ahead.
Yes, I just wanted to clarify. So if we didn't have the consultant and our contractor did something wrong, we could potentially forfeit that $1 million grant, correct?
Apparently so.
So this is our insurance policy that we will be receiving that $1 million when all is said and done.
Correct.
Thank you.
Any other questions on that item?
Yeah,
Go ahead.
if you don't mind, Mr. Mayor. So this would be $37,500 in total of additional requests that is that correct? Or, so there's a $30,000 and a $7,500?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. That was, I just wanted to be clear of that, sorry. And that for this, that we would need to get done by the end of this budget workshop so that this could be decided on. The timeline is early July?
Yes. There would be an item brought back at the upcoming council meeting to, not the one today, but to recommend that those additional funds to be spent if council wishes to have it included.
Thank you for clarifying that. I think that's what he's looking for. Is that what you're looking for? Yeah, we're voting today. Yep. Any other questions on that? Nope. Okay.
Do we need to do an actual budget, or actual vote, or to get that recommendation?
Well, that's what, I guess, my feeling was you were saying that we were going to vote on it the next time, so we're not going to vote this time on whether we're going to approve it or not.
Yeah, we don't need a formal vote. What we can do is I'm kind of reading everybody's body motion and head nodding, so it looks like we're okay with that, and we'll bring that back on the 28th if that's all right.
All right, sounds good. Sounds great. All right. We're going to continue on with the presentation.
Yes.
Thank you.
Mayor, members of the council. Now, if you have your budget workbooks, which we were provided in both paper and electronic format, we'll open those up and review the actual budget workbook. So in our PowerPoint review, we already ran through what's in the transmittal letter. So unless anybody has any specific questions on the transmittal letter, we would begin on page 18, which shows the sources and uses. So on page 18, this is a summary of the city's budget. If you look over on the far left, you see a listing of all the different funds that the city is managing and the various restrictions, as I call them, that are placed on those special funds. For instance, CDBG is restricted, like we were talking about, to only use on CDBG. And you see the beginning fund balance or reserve balance that we start with at the beginning of 2023, then the projected revenues and expenditures, recommended transfers, and then the projected in-planned reserves. And if you look on there, you'll see that some of those end balances for fund balance, for instance, Measure R shows a negative fund balance right there, negative 2.5. That's some of that money that I was talking about that the general fund has advanced on their behalf because they haven't received all their grants back. So that's some of that money that's been advanced. So that just shows you a picture of what it looks like for 23-24. And then you see the same picture on the next page, page 19 for 24-25. And if you look at the general fund, you'll see that it starts with a $13.8 million balance and ends with a $14.1 million balance on that 24-25 year. So that shows that we're taking a slight bit of money into net income, but not much. And then you can see that still Fund 18 and 19 are shown down at the bottom with that negative fund balance. And the city is very hopeful that we'll get the money back before 24-25, and then we would actually have that cash. But we don't want to plan on it. We want to budget very conservatively and assume that because it could be a couple years more before we actually complete some of those audits. The next page, page 20, shows the city's award. And that is something that is judged throughout North America and something that the city should be very proud of. So our budget goes out for review by 2 other agencies, finance directors like myself in our spare time. That's what we like to do, read other people's budgets. It's a lot of fun. And what it's telling you is not that you have the most accurate budget or that you didn't have a deficit or that anything like that, although you don't. But it's telling you, this tells you that they've reviewed it and you've disclosed everything that you should be disclosing to the public. You're being very transparent according to a set of standards that are set by an organization called the Government Finance Officers Association. So that's something they should be very proud of and something that the city will submit for with this upcoming budget and we'll hope to receive. So unless there's any questions, skipping on to page 22. This shows our interfund.
I'm sorry, I have a quick question.
Okay.
Just to make sure I'm reading this right on page 21. So is our head count 43?
Yes, including the council members and the appointed treasurer.
Got it. Thank you.
Then in those transfers, this just shows the money that the general fund has to send out to support some of the other funds. For instance, we're required that, you see that 2 AH Improvement Authority bonds, $913,274. That's the mortgage on this building and the building up top. So the general fund, that's just an accounting way it has to be done, has to transfer that money to another fund and then pay the bill. We are also required by law to transfer the money to the Housing Successor Agency, that $134,000. That's 20% of a loan amount that the city receives from the former successor agency. The other transfers are transfers that were requested by council or are being set up so that we can fund like our capital projects and have a little bit of time to build up some money on some of the ones that we're going to be working on, like the restroom projects and the light pole study for the Reyes Adobe Bridge. So I just like to point out that that's what those transfers are, and that's where you can find out what's going on at the city. So moving on to page 24. We've gone over these revenues already when we discussed them on the PowerPoint, but if anybody has questions, please feel free to let me know. The city budgets very conservatively on revenues and just tries to make sure that we are prepared in case we have any unexpected downturns. So that moves us all the way forward, unless anybody has any questions, to...
Could I ask just a quick
Oh,
question?
yes.
On the transit occupancy tax, has there been time to see an uptick from the, short-term rentals?
Not yet.
Not yet, it's too soon.
Too soon. Still working on getting that.
So have we included that or not in our projection?
Yes, we did include a line for that. Based on our forecast, we anticipate receiving $91,980 in 23-24 and the same in 24-25. So that's about the amount of the net income that we projected. So that number right there just about makes the city break even.
Okay, thank you.
Actually, a follow-up question on that, on the transient occupancy tax. I know during COVID, we were very safe about the predictions with how much revenue that we would get from that. The revenue that you're showing on here, is this very conservative about? It is, okay. So,
It is still very conservative, and you'll see we left it flat in 23-24 and 24-25. The hope is that it actually will go up a little bit between the years. We want every year you anticipate seeing a little uptick, but I think we're still noticing a lag in some of the business travel that we experienced before, and I know the Chamber's doing a great job of promoting our hotels. Everybody has family, they should stay in hotels in Agoura Hills.
thank you for that. Thank you for that comment. Any other questions on that? No? Okay. Thank you.
So turning to page 40, unless there's any questions between there. This is the new division of the city manager's department, the communication division. And within this is where we have budgeted for all of the staff time and then the various consultants that we use for our communication needs. And included in this is the additional website upgrades that we're going to be looking at this year, and also the social media ads that have been added to the budget. So these are not, while you don't see any costs in the prior 2 years, they're not all new costs. There's probably a little bit of an increase, but really we just gathered everything and put it in one spot because it was budgeted in a couple of different areas and it was not good for staff trying to figure out what was going on. So then the city clerk budget, I do like to point out that contract services over there in 24-25, you see that uptick in that account, and that has to do with the election costs. And we get a projection from the county, and we get billed what we get billed, so we don't have a lot of control over that number, unfortunately. On page 43, within the finance department, so for 23-24, we do have a slight increase, and that is for a fee study, which would be done on all of the city's revenue sources and fees that we're charging. And you notice if you look across, you see that the finance salaries go all over the place. Like If you're looking at that first line, regular salaries is 252,000 in year one, then you get out to the final year and it's 444,000. And it's not because I got a huge raise. It's because a lot of our salaries are budgeted, we try as hard as we can to send them to different grants and different resources that we can that are more restrictive, and then bring them back to the general fund at the very end. So in some of the earlier years in 21, 22, our successor agency was allowed a much larger administrative allowance. So we were able to charge more time there. That administrative allowance has been restricted to a lesser amount when we signed our last and final ROPS, which is okay because we got to raise our interest on our loan. So at the end of the day, we came out okay, but the salaries had to come back to the general fund. So that's why you see some of the departments like that where the salaries are all over the place. It's because we're trying to push them out to the more restrictive sources and then back to the general fund last. So if you move forward to page 46, this automated office systems is where the city puts all of the software needs, the computer needs. This is where land speed's budgeted. Everything goes into this one number, and you'll notice that it went up quite a bit in 23, 24, and that is as the city has budgeted for some new software for community development, trying to get the permitting systems more online and help Denise out to make things a lot more automated. Page 47 is the Los Angeles County Sheriff. That's our total budget that hits the general fund. And again, 7.6% increase in 23-24, and then another 4% just based on average for 24-25. We've not been given that projection yet. Then on page 48 is your emergency services. So this is where the CERT funding is for the training supplies and the other needs that they have requested. And right next to that on 49 is your emergency incident. This is ideally zero. We've budgeted for zero. We'd love it to be zero. This year, you can see there's $111,000 in the 22-23 budget, and that's because we had that road failure, I believe, over on Driver. And when we have things like that that we hope we can be reimbursed from Cal OES, FEMA, other resources like that, we budget it in this area. We did not budget for the offsetting revenue to that because sometimes it takes quite a few years to receive it, and sometimes the amount we receive is less, quite a bit less than the amount we spent. So these are the kinds of things when we have that little bit in our reserve or that extra revenue coming in that we're hoping we don't have to budget for. We've not counted on it, but if they come up, we do have adequate resources to pay for. Moving on to page 52, this is community development in Denise's realm. And boy, there's a lot of different goals in here to do with the styrofoam ban, education, and the options for the lighting impacts on the new wildlife routes, the commercial cannabis surveys, and the penalties for removal of protected tree species. So that's where all that's packed into in this budget here. So unless anybody has any questions, we can roll forward to page 60. And parks maintenance. So this is where there's been some money budgeted here for organics expansion that was discussed in some of our meetings. And then within Public Works on page 61, I did want to point out that an update to the traffic mitigation fees is in here, as well as some of the money for the feasibility and naturalizing the creeks and waterways. And on page 63, your landscape maintenance. You'll notice that this bottom line went up quite a bit across the years, and this has to do with the requirement for AB 1383 and purchasing mulch and utilizing it within the community. Unless anybody has any questions, we can roll up to page 67. When we showed those transfers between the different funds, this is one of those funds where we've been setting a little bit of money aside for some of these higher end projects that are funded by the general fund. And so you can see that we have money in here for the lighting considerations. We have money for park improvements and the restrooms, and money for the parking lot overlay that's being done. And then rolling on forward to page 71. This is your Measure R grant. And so you can see in 23-24 that this is a really large planned expenditure, $5.9 million. Then 24-25, it's down to $27,000. And that's that money that we're planning on using for the linear park project. Page 77 is your Prop A fund. This is a local sales tax override source. This is your where the dial-a-ride and the new AH Go program is budgeted within your Proposition A fund. And on page 79, Prop C, which is another type of sales tax override, has a little bit different uses. This is where some of the bikeway improvements are budgeted. And then when we roll forward to page 83, we have our supplemental law enforcement fund there, Fund 240. And this is where we have some of the new safety programs that the city is budgeting for. We are able to use some of these special funds to assist us with some of that. So that brings us through the entire budget, unless somebody has any other specific questions, and takes us to the CIP listing, which is the landscape page that's found on page 90 and 91. So while the budget's only a 2-year working document, the CIP shows you your 5 years out, and these are our larger capital projects that the city is planning for the next 5 years. So if you look at it, it shows the project itself, the first one, for instance, being the annual citywide street resurfacing, and then the funding sources that are anticipated for those projects. So this is how you can get a look at what's being thought of for the forecast of the next few years and what the sources are. Then down at the very bottom, you see a few projects that the city is hoping to be able to complete, but we're still either seeking some grant funding and looking for ways to come up with ways to fund some of those last few projects. So if we don't have any further questions right now, Eric, if you can bring back the PowerPoint. We are ready to go through and ask for the, oh, okay, well, why don't we want to go ahead and do the finance policies before we give subcommittee comments. So let's do that. So if we go to page 93, since you still already have all your iPads open, you see the required policy review. So every year, we actually have a finance policy that says every 3 years, all of the finance policies will be reviewed. So this year, the policies up for review are the independent auditor policy, which talks about how we have to rotate our auditing firms so that you don't have the same firm auditing you for 20 years and you're sure you're getting a good perspective, and that complies with state law. They also have a financial policy, which is a policy that says we'll review the policies every 3 years. And then we have an investment policy, which we have to update every year. The finance subcommittee reviewed all these policies and did not have any questions. If nobody has any questions or concerns, they do not have to go back for amendment at the next meeting. If anybody has any questions or concerns, then we will bring up those questions for adoption at the next council meeting. Everybody okay with the policies as they're suggested? I do want to point out that the investment policy, as it's drafted right now, does match exactly what we had in the prior years. We have sent our policy out for review by Chandler Asset Management. They did come back with a few suggested amendments. No real amendments to what we're suggesting to invest in, but some language amendments. So that will probably be brought back to the Finance Committee, Subcommittee, and then brought back to you at a later date. But we needed to have something in place right now because it does expire every year, and then we'll work to address some of those suggested amendments. So that being said, we will turn the meeting over for any comments from our Finance Subcommittee.
Okay. So I'll go ahead and move toward comments from the Finance Subcommittee. Go
Thank
ahead.
you. I'm happy to start. Councilmember Wolf and I are on the Finance Committee this year, and while Ms. Trulson rightly thanks the current and the past councils for, a very conservative approach to our budget, of course, much of the thanks goes to her and her. I'm sure you're up sleepless at night like we all are for our own budgets, and you've got, 20 million more to worry about, so 20 million plus. So I first want to thank you. You've made going through the process so clear and easy, and thank you for spending the time with us. I want to say just personally, I'm so happy there's a communications category fund. It just is a wonderful fruition of, years of hard work, and that it's grown and been so successful and has its own little home on your budget just makes me so happy. We talked a lot about the linear park and Canaan corridor and the cash flow that needs to come and go for that. We even talked about the protections when the federal debt ceiling was, when we were unsure what was going to happen, because of course that affects us as well. And so again, Ms. Trulson and her team, they're just so on top of it. They had plans to, move money around and just always protect the city. So I want you to know that they're always thinking about even those bigger picture things. The one thing I want to mention, we did spend some time talking about the sheriff's budget. They raised their rates. I think it was over 7%, you said, this year, which seemed like such a big jump. And we were reminded that they really tried to keep it low during COVID and post-COVID because they knew their cities were hurting with cash flow. And so even though it is a bit of a tough pill to swallow, I think it's important to remember that they tried as best they could to not increase too much over the past few years until we could all get on our feet. But I want the public to know in this memo at the beginning, 26% of our general fund goes towards our public safety, and so that's really says a lot about our priorities, our concern for our residents, and so we spent a bunch of time talking about that. So we had a lot of our questions answered. And certainly thankful for this budget that is always tough, but a lot better looking than the last few years. So certainly ready to proceed to the next step. And I don't know if Councilmember Wolf, if you want to join in on any comments there.
Yeah, I don't have a whole lot to add, but thank the finance team for bearing with me. As a new council member, being on this committee was a little bit intimidating, but I felt that I was brought up to speed, and I really appreciate your patience. I think it is true that budgets show our priorities, and we are showing our priorities in public safety, environmental protection, taking care of our residents. It was really jarring to see the impact COVID did have on our finances, especially our transit occupancy fees, and how important that is for vitality of the city. And it's good to see that is bouncing back. And it gave a new insight into the importance of bringing people into our city. Thank you for working with me, and I look forward to continuing to build off the legacy that the council, the prudent legacy the council has put forward. So thank you.
Any other comments from other council members? Since We already got the Finance
Yeah,
Committee.
I would also like to thank Christy, because I'm also new on the Council for Budgets, and you took the time to meet with me and go over all my little Post-its. So thank you. It's made it a lot clearer, and now I know what I'm looking at. So I appreciate all the hard work you've done. Thank you.
Are we ready for questions?
Sure.
Or just comments about,
I think we can ask questions, I guess, but we still have to go into obviously the community projects.
okay, whenever
part of it.
you're ready. I
All right.
just wasn't sure.
Um,
I mean,
I think-
ditto to Ms. Trulson and her team.
I think we're ready to move into the community projects part of it. And, okay. And then we can save other comments for the end as well.
Yes. I think that City Manager Hamburger will take over the community grants portion.
So the Finance Subcommittee reviewed the submittals for our Community Outreach Grant, and you should have a form that has the requested amounts or recommended amounts, I apologize, for those grants. So this is the opportunity now for the rest of the council to weigh in on that, and then what we'd like to do is leave this meeting with a final number direction so that we can include that and finalize the budget and then present that for adoption along with the entire budget at your next scheduled meeting. So with that, I don't know if the Finance Subcommittee wants to make any comments initially, and then we'll turn to the rest of council.
Is that okay? Yeah.
Yes.
I will just share that our thought when we went through this spreadsheet was we tried to streamline quite a bit. So, for example, just right off the bat, there were some amazing organizations, but they were not 501c3s. And so we just didn't want to open that door. Once you do that, then I think we'd have a floodgate. And the community outreach grants are really meant for 501c3s. So we crossed off everyone who just didn't meet that minimum requirement. The other thing we talked about was kind of streamlining how we dealt with schools and boosters, because when you look at boosters and elementary schools and all of the different school groups, you know, more or less they serve a similar population. And so we streamlined that amount. We made all of the awards to the schools the same so that, you know, there was no favoritism to any school and this and that. And we felt that was fair just because, you know, again, elementary schools are smaller, but then so are boosters. So we felt that that was fair. And then we also just wanted to take it really, really slowly with the new applications. There were some groups that looked like they're doing wonderful work, but they didn't have very many years of balance sheet and, you know, financial history. And so we wanted to play it very conservatively with that. And also, you know, we didn't want any new organizations to overtake some of our existing long-time recipients of the grants. And so even though some of these new groups were asking for a lot, well, everybody asked for a lot. If I were them, I would ask for a lot. We started them a little bit smaller so that we could see what their impact was on the community and, you know, kind of reward that as the years go on. I don't know if you have anything to add or.
I just want to thank you for, I thought we worked really well together on putting this proposition to the council. I appreciated looking at the schools. I thought that was a really good idea that you had to kind of even the playing field there. But this was difficult, and I look forward to the conversation with the rest of the council on this, because while this was relatively quick, it's hard there's only a limited amount of funds, and so this wasn't easy, and I look forward to the discussion.
Great, and thank you for the comments. I think, why don't we go ahead and kind of go into the comments section on the rest of the council. If you have any comments on specific items that we want to bring up as a council and then talk about it. And we could each go through maybe which items that we have questions on, and then we could come back and talk about all of them, if that's how everybody wants to do it, or?
Sounds good to me.
Okay.
That's fine. So first, I have a question to Mr. Hamburger. I think you can answer this. The previous year's totals, it says includes dollars granted to organization that did not apply this year. Is that the money that we gave to MRCA to remove the fence? Half of the, the 20,000?
You're correct. The last fiscal year, or this current fiscal year, is when we gave the 20,000. It was a one-time to assist with that fence. Yes.
Great, thank you. And I think that the Finance Committee did a good job, with all the inflation. Quite a few of these have been slightly increased, which I support. The one that wasn't increased that I would like to see a small increase is the Golden Heart Ranch. I'm sure you all read about it, but Golden Heart Ranch is one of the very few organizations, it might be the only organization that works with disabled adults anywhere in the area. And so I know I'd like to see that increase to 1,000 if nobody objects to it. Other than that, I support all the other ones.
Okay. Councilmember Sylvester.
I also would like to thank the Finance Committee for working on this. I have a couple of questions. Youth Alert. I wasn't sure about that one, so can you tell me why you decided to give them a donation?
Yes, they're new, and that was actually the only person who showed up at our subcommittee meeting. The founder came to the meeting and sat in the room and explained to us what he was going to do. That was one that really did not have a lot of local history. He moved here from another state, and so there was some history from, was it Kentucky? He came from another state, and he's an Agoura Hills resident now. He told us about what he did. He gave us a big, it's in our files, what his application entailed. And so he was in the room. We just wanted to say welcome and give him a little start to his
right. And I didn't
service in Agoura Hills.
I didn't quite understand. How is he doing his program? Through the schools, or is it completely separate? And where does it take place?
I think he was doing it through the schools. Is that right? Do you remember? You don't remember? I believe it was through the schools.
Okay, but we're not sure. I just
Well,
wanted a bit more clarity.
we went through 35 different things, so I'm trying to remember. But yes, I believe he was doing it through the schools.
Okay, and at all school levels, or elementary, or middle, or?
I mean, the packet is in our
right.
Our download, so.
Yeah, I know. I looked at it, but I don't know why. I just maybe because I've never heard of it.
I'd have to look it up on our
Okay.
download.
I actually was curious about that one as well.
Yes, I would just like a little bit more information on that one. That's all.
If I may, Mayor, just to jump in on, so on the last page, I think it's like 236 on there, on the submittal on your iPads, they have what their pricing sheet, and the pricing sheet, what they explained to us was the cost to provide the education, and they target middle school and high school students.
Right.
Just to answer your question.
But yeah, I know. Sorry, I left it in the other room. But what I was just, have we spoken to the schools to see if they have room for this program? That's all. I just want to know the coordination more.
I would have to pull up. It's on Sophos, right?
Yeah, it's Community Grant Part 3. It's at the end. And, I mean, these are all very valid questions that we had, too. But, yeah.
I would just like to get some feedback from the schools saying, yes, this is something that we're going to bring in, or, if it's really going to happen. That's my question.
Right, but then the one issue is like which schools? Is it just Las Virgenes, or is it Conejo school districts? So
yeah, and if I recall, it was a lot of the startup. He was starting up. I'm loading it, but it's
right.
These were thousands of pages, so I'm
yes,
trying to pull it up.
No, I understand.
Yeah, we can pull it up while we're talking about other things.
Okay, and then I obviously support the schools 100%, but I'm a little concerned that for the first time, because Mariposa is new and Willow is new, we have 7 schools in the district. we've only given directly to 2 of them. Am I correct? And we've given some to
Agoura
the,
High.
What do you mean?
well, no, but for the PFA, PFCs. That we have 7 lots of PFA, PFCs in the
Right, but they have
district.
to apply.
Right. But on my past histories of going through the schools of PFA and PFC president, we never applied for grants because we were told we wouldn't get them. So,
We've given them.
I always applied. When I was president, I applied for everything.
but just for the general PFA, because I'm just looking at the library media, we're just giving them 1,000 too, and I think the library media project is something that's going to affect all the school libraries. I did actually have a conversation with Tina Johnson.
The library always asks for a lot of money. They also ask for money from PFCs.
Right.
And so, we don't have an unlimited amount.
No,
And so
I
knowing that they
understand.
get funding from other schools and areas, and, that's part of the tough discussion we had, was that we just made all of the school groups an even playing field.
Right.
Because as it is, when you take out the one-time MRCA from last year, we're still like 50% over what we normally are.
Right.
And so, we just don't have the capacity to
Yeah,
do
okay.
more.
So
on a lot of
my
things.
concern would be that going forward, next year, all 7 could come forward,
They should apply. We
So, and
send,
we
I
have
know,
to-
we send messages to everybody who's applied in the past, and we also promote it on our website. I promote it on my newsletter, so they have to apply.
So just to clarify, we'll be ready to move forward next year if all 7 apply
It
equally?
depends on how much money we have and
Yeah.
who else applies,
Okay.
I personally think that it's a good policy if the student level is the same, to, as Councilmember Wolf said, keep it an even playing field.
Yeah, no,
If we
I
get
agree
more
with
next year,
you.
we may have to lower it.
Yeah.
I mean, we'll see. Every year is different.
Okay. I just want us to be prepared, because I agree with you, it should be an equal,
We
allotment.
encourage everybody to apply. I mean, we blast it out to the whole community.
Right.
I can add a little bit of historical context, that we've had different PFA groups in the past that would have applied who didn't apply this year. So my guess is it depends on who the PFA
presidents
group
are.
is and
Yeah.
whether they can pull this all together. And there's been years
Yes.
where we did exactly that, where we just gave everybody the same. There's been years when we didn't, way back when. I think for the last
Yes.
few, we've been giving,
And
trying to
just
give the same amount.
Just a history question here, because I know in Calabasas, they hand out just automatically a set amount to each school every year. Has our city council ever contemplated that? And would we?
Calabasas has much different revenue streams than we do.
Oh, I agree with you, so it wouldn't be the same amount, but I'm just saying,
This is how we do it. I mean, we've talked about that in the past, and there were, back when I was PFC chair, we were able to even work through some of the redevelopment funds depending on what we were doing and if it qualified for those funds. This
Right.
is the way Agoura Hills has always done it. I think because we just don't have the same amount of revenue that
Yes.
our neighbors have.
No, I agree with you on that, but I just know that some PFCs are more proactive than others, and then the school will suffer for that. So that's why I was saying, could we ever contemplate just having a flat amount, whatever it is, whether it's $100, $200, so that each school proportionately gets.
I mean, personally, I think that we blast this out, and if you want the money, you got to work for it. That's life, and that's what PFCs do when they pass things over. You have to work for the money, and every PFC has a budget. Every PFC knows that they got what they got last year.
Yes.
So you have to hustle when you're a nonprofit.
But that's sort of punishing the children.
Penny, we don't have unlimited funds. So
No,
it's not our
I-
job to go out
Yes.
and give away money. These are taxpayer dollars.
Yes, I
That,
agree.
we're.
Well, that's why I'd like to see it done evenly between
I
the
understand, then they
schools.
need to apply. there's a whole application process where they have to give financial documents, they have to fill out forms, they have to tell us what they're doing, they have to give us their board information, they have to provide their 501c3s. It's work.
Yes.
And some of them don't do it.
I know-
It's not
I'm-
our burden
I know
to
they
go
do.
out
That's
there.
That's why I'm suggesting we may consider just having a flat amount each year, whatever it is, and each school would get that automatically without having to go through all that work.
So this is a grant program. You have to apply for a grant program.
And perhaps we can discuss that next year. We can agendize
for
and have a
goals.
discussion about it for the next year's budget or 2 years from now. I always like looking and seeing what the school's going to use it for, or the PFA is going to
Yes.
use it for, because I like to know before I just add to their budget. But that's just my personal feeling. I like looking at what everybody's going to use it for. But I'm open to, if we want to have a further discussion about that for the
Yeah,
future.
I would like to,
But that would be a goal that you would need to bring to the goal
Yeah.
session.
absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you.
And my iPad is not pulling up the community grants application for that youth alert.
Would you like
So
to
what
see
I would
mine? I
say,
have it.
yeah, Jeremy's got it. So
Oh, okay.
what I would say is, you know, we can always pull that and you can review it. It's on our iPads. And if you want to review it and make it conditional or bring it back, I mean, we heard from the gentleman who came, we thought it was, you know, worth giving him a little bit of money to start up, but, you know, that's why we bring this to discussion, so I would encourage you to read it on the iPad, and then, I don't know if you want to bring it up at the next meeting, or how you want to do it, because I want to make sure you review it, and you have a chance to ask
Yeah,
him
no,
any
I
questions.
did read it already.
And
So
thi-
that's why I had some questions.
And this was one that we wanted council input on.
Yeah.
We really want to hear what you guys think, especially for the youth alert. So,
Yeah, thank you.
Anybody else before I start asking questions? Okay, no problem. I think I'm going to either ask City Manager or Ms. Juleson. The budget for 21-22 was obviously during COVID. What was the budget prior to that? Because I know I was on the Finance Subcommittee then, and we purposely lowered it during COVID because we were trying to make sure we kept a balanced budget. And do you know what like in the 18 to 19, 19 to 20, somewhere in there, those budgets, what we were allocating?
I apologize, I do not know, but my recollection would be that it was very similar, around 15,000 in those prior years that we were giving. But if somebody has a different recollection, I apologize.
I can jump in. Historically, I think the city council has, budgeted somewhere in the range of 15,000, about 25,000 or so. And that's, the last, I would say, 8 to 10 years of kind of where we've been outside of the COVID years.
Okay. And this year's budget, and when we did the budget, how much is, for this community projects, how much did we set aside for the budget? Did we have money set aside, or is this going to be, we did have money? How much did we have set aside for this?
Mayor Anstead, we anticipated 30,000 originally, but as we spoke, we do have enough budget to do the 33.2, and that we do have that extra amount within our budget. So staff has seen this already and knows that that would fit within our budget.
Sounds good. And the additional amount was I just want to make sure I understood when you were presenting, that one of my questions was, I waited to ask it because I just wanted to get everybody through all the agenda. The 140, I think for 22, 23, I think it was 141,000 net income and then 180,000 net income, if I'm not mistaken. So that's basically money that we have that we're not spending. That's kind of a cushion, a little bit of a cushion for this extra money that we're talking about.
Yes.
Correct on that? Yes. Okay. Thank you. I appreciate that. So I think that's great. I mean, it's awesome. And I mean, I didn't make any comments earlier too on the budget, but I mean, I was totally confident as you were going through it that everything stacked up, and I spent quite a few years on the finance subcommittee and enjoyed the experience doing that. And so I have confidence in the budget and how it was allocated, and I want to thank you again for all your great work on it. And so it was fantastic. It's never a thought in my mind. I know that if you see that we're not going to hit our budget, or if we're going to go over somewhere, you're going to flag it way ahead of time, and then we make sure that we meet that budget. Because again, during COVID, you did that, and you made sure that we were within our budget. And so I want to thank you again for doing that. So going back now to the community projects, a couple of items that stood out to me whenever I was reviewing it was the biggest thing that stood out to me was the Topanga Banjo Fiddle Contest, which was new. They asked for 5,000 and it
Yeah,
was
it's
allocated.
actually not new. It's just being redirected to this process. If I'm correct, you want to clarify that, Nate?
Absolutely. So Mayor Ann said the city has supported this festival in the past. We've done it through different marketing and outreach efforts and communication efforts. But what we've asked them to do, because we get so many requests for events and fundraisers that happen during the year, and we just can't support all of those. And so we asked them to bring it through this process, which is why you're seeing that now. That was my request to them, as well as anybody else that asked throughout the year.
Okay. And the rationale for us to pay for it is that it brings in business to the city, and can you give me some background on why we felt like that we need to support it?
I could tell you, yeah, previously the city council was supportive of being a sponsor of the event, as it brought in a couple thousand people, and they would stay in the hotels, visit restaurants, fill up gas. So more of an economic development approach to it,
Okay.
and trying to limit it in, I think, a $5,000 sponsorship. Felt like that the return on the investment was good at that point.
Okay.
And if I can add,
Sure.
I just want to say we get a lot of bang for our buck because the City of Agoura Hills logo is on everything for the festival, and it's pretty widespread. And so, yes, and we've always hoped it would turn into a 2-day festival for the powers that be out there. We're still hoping that, and then even more people would stay in the City of Agoura Hills and dine here. So, yeah, it's been I think it's been a good expenditure over the years to be a sponsor for that particular. And what they're doing there is actually fundraising for the rebuilding of Paramount Ranch.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a double win for us. It's a win for us that we get the PR and people come into our community, and then we also get, ultimately, when Paramount Ranch reopens, which is going to probably be in another year or two, our residents love that and get to enjoy that place. So
Awesome.
it's kind of a double win for us. I see it that way.
Okay, that's awesome.
Mayor Anstead,
Yep.
when I first saw this, I had the same questions as you, and I was confused as well. But then I think also this was kind of budgeted before, so this wasn't a new ask.
Okay.
I think was my understanding, but I had the same exact question. But City Manager Hamburger, is that correct that this was in a way budgeted?
It was, yeah, we did pay for it out of our budget approved by the council in previous years, just out of a different line item. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, I got it. Thank you for that explanation. Let's see, the other item that I wanted to ask about, actually that's not on here, so, and actually this is to the city manager. One of the projects that we've been talking about, and actually I didn't get a chance to talk to you before the meeting about it, was the Morrison Park project that I know the city's very much committed to, and we've even put in applications for grants for. And I know it would only be a token thing, but I was trying to think about, like, how come we didn't allocate a couple $1,000s to even give them out of this fund to be able to support that project. And I just want your comments on that, just to have it talk it through a little bit.
I think Well, number one, they didn't submit an application, but
Right.
part of that is because we've worked with them. We're doing in-kind services where they can hold events at the event center, so there's a dollar value to that. Although none of the public or you would see that, but Amy and her staff spend quite a lot of time planning for those events, getting all the insurance, the security, all of that kind of stuff that we have. So we're taking on that burden. And then the grant application, which you mentioned, I mean, for $300,000 is, rather than us focusing on any other projects, we've had to pull that grant together. It wasn't something that was necessarily planned for, so the amount of time that we spent on that. So we tried, I mean, we're definitely dedicating time to that. And we didn't, and I can't speak for the subcommittee, but from a staff perspective, we didn't allocate any funds to that because it wasn't an application. And the way this is set up is an application process.
Okay, so I guess maybe the same thing that we had the discussion on the schools, maybe I should really try to put the fire underneath them for next year if we decide that we want to.
Sure, yeah. You know, we do an extensive outreach. You know, Romero and a couple of our staff, you know, we advertise in the Acorn along all the other things that Councilor Love has mentioned. You know, we really make an effort to reach out to everybody and encourage them to apply as much as we possibly can.
Okay, thank you.
Could I just follow up on that? Because I agree with Nate. I mean, I've seen a lot in all our weekly bulletins that go out asking people to donate. So I think we're spending a lot more than any of these grants.
You got it.
Ultimately,
Which
with
is
the work
great.
that the staff has done, and it will continue to do, and I'd like to thank them for that.
You got it. Thank you. And then the one item that I wanted to ask or talk about specifically with the amount of request and how much we're allocating is the Boys and Girls Club of Greater Conejo Valley, because I just think that they do great things for the kids in the community that can't afford, like after the parents can't afford the after-school programs. And I think it's a great way to support our community, both the children and the parents. And I know they asked, I think, for 3,000 from the 2,000, and I thought that's still reasonable. And I wanted to try to propose increasing that to $3,000. So that was the one discussion item that I wanted to have with the council. So anybody want to talk about it?
Yeah, again, we just dealt with a finite number that we had to make work with all of these organizations. So I would say, I guess one question would be to ask, I don't think anybody on this council would be opposed to that. I think the question is it within the budget? And if it's yes, great. And if it's not, do we want to lower or remove for this year the youth alert, or how do you all want to allocate that? I think if you wanted us to go back to youth alert and say we needed another year or two to see how you or lower it. I mean, I think he still charges the schools for his services. This was to kind of help him get up and running. It was my understanding. So, we're open to talking about whether you want to change that amount, either lower or, or remove it and then up. I would absolutely be in agreement with Mayor Pro Tem Buckley Weber to increase the Golden Heart Ranch, and then, absolutely, if there's extra, put that into the Boys and Girls Club. Whatever you all
Ms.
think.
Trulson, if we added 1,000 or 1,250 to the amount that we have now, would that be getting us with extra money or that we had?
We can absolutely add the extra money. I did that pocket test. If you guys watch that video, we have all the money out, so you guys can have that extra $1,000.
Okay, thank you very much. Go ahead.
I
Mayor
don't mean to be mean, but I actually love the Boys and Girls Club. But they would be getting more than everybody on our list. And, unless the Finance Committee thinks that I don't know. I don't see why we would pick them out versus like the Friendship Circle. that's like right here in the city of Agoura Hills helping
know, this is
disabled
why it's
youth.
so
I mean,
hard.
we have to cut it off somewhere, you know, and so it's kind of like, I mean, you know, the Conejo Los Virgenes Future Foundation and Senior Concerns and MANA. You know, we could sit here all day and just say, well, I'd like to see another 1,000 here or another 500 there, and the next thing you know, we'll be up to $50,000 but I think that's what the Finance Committee basically does, and we, you know, like when I say that with the Golden Heart Ranch, it's $250, and it was one of the few that wasn't increased this year, and so.
Well, and
you
Boys and
know.
Girls wasn't increased, but maybe we meet in the middle at 2,500.
That's what I was going to propose as well.
I'm comfortable with that.
Wow. We did try to increase everybody a little bit, and we weren't able to do it for everybody. So, you know, maybe we can do 2,500, and then Mayor Pro Tem Buckley Weber, if there is another one that's close to your heart that we weren't able to increase, maybe we can use that extra $500 to bump.
No, I think what you did was good. When I was always doing it, we were much more like in the 19,000, 20,000. So I'm impressed that you got away with 33,000. But so, you know, I support it the way it is. I just wanted to see the extra 250 for the Golden Heart Ranch because they're the only one, I believe, in the area that helps with disabled adults. And so, or challenged adults, I should say. And so that's, you know, that's dear to my heart. Get it? Golden Heart. But, you know, whatever the council wants to do for the Boys and Girls Club, I'll support. I support it the way it is, but if the rest of the council wants to give more money there, then let's do it.
You got it. I think I'm fine with 2,500.
Let's do 2,500?
That sounds good. And, good.
That's fine.
So, Ms. Juleson, do you need any more direction than that?
And that goes to the program at Lindero, right?
I think it goes to all the elementary
all the-
schools, after-school program.
Willow has Boys and Girls Club. It's
Willow has them.
Willow and Lindero, I believe, have.
Willow and
Okay,
Lindero.
so to Mayor Pro Tem's point, Senior Concerns is the other one that wasn't raised. And we know that was a little extra that was passing that pocket test, right? Because we were going to go up 1,000, and now we went up 500 for the Boys and Girls Club. So maybe we can give the rest of that to Senior Concerns that also asked for a little bit more, but didn't get an increase this year.
Sure.
I would also like to give a plug to Senior Concerns. I
Okay.
used it with my mother, and they were wonderful.
Yeah.
And they do a lot of good
Yeah.
things for people.
So it's the same amount, we're just splitting it into two different groups that didn't get an increase this year per this spreadsheet, and now they'll get a little bit of an increase. Does that work for everyone?
Works for me.
Yes.
All right.
Works for me as well.
So we don't have to cut anybody. We're just going to.
So if I'm understanding the conversation,
Yep.
we are upping the Boys and Girls Club to 2,500.
Yep.
We're upping Golden Heart Ranch to 1,000, and we're upping Senior Concerns to 2,500.
Correct.
And that's the same amount that had passed that pocket test a few minutes ago, total.
I'm good with that.
Okay.
Yes. So at the meeting, where we adopt at the June 28th meeting, I will adjust that line for the proposed community grants to be the number that it totals up to and bring that to your attention. Thank you.
I do just want to follow up with you about the youth alert. I want to be, you know, we had a lot of questions for this man, simply because the balance sheet was not local, it wasn't here, but, you know, he spoke to us, we felt that he was doing good work, but I want to make sure that we're all comfortable. So I just want to bring that one up to see what you all think about that one line item.
You know, it's $750, and so I don't have a problem. If you were giving $10,000, I would want a lot more information. So I looked at it, I had some questions about it, but, it sounds like Youth Alert would be a good organization in our community. And so, I don't have a problem with giving them $750, get them up and running and see how it works. We've done that with other organizations, and some of them it's worked and some of them it hasn't. And so, I think just the $750 seems to make sense to me.
Okay.
And let's give it a year and see how he does. And I'd really love to see, get a report when we do get that, don't we?
Oh, yeah, well,
Yeah, so-
definitely. If you
so
plot, okay,
I'm comfortable with that.
okay, great.
Awesome. Any other comments from city council?
Are you comfortable with it?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. No, I'm fine. Any other comments?
And not about this, but I still do have a question and a comment.
Sure, go ahead.
About the overall
Go ahead, Mayor
budget.
Pro Tem.
So I was just curious, because I may have missed it, but years ago, we did some set-aside funds. I think there's 3 or 4 of them. And last year, we had a set-aside fund for open space. Are we putting any money in for this year? I guess I didn't see it.
It was next year, right?
So the fund is created,
Yes.
and what we have typically done with those set-aside funds is, as we go through the budget year, we'll bring back mid-year budget. Maybe sometimes there's years where things are looking great, and where we haven't spent as much as we anticipated, and typically the council at that point, or at the end of the fiscal year, would appropriate additional funds to that set-aside. That's how we've done it in the past, but
Right.
just for guidance.
So we didn't set any new funds aside yet, have we? I know we had
I thought we
50,000.
did for the next year.
You have 50, so the council has
Yeah.
50,000 that you've already.
We've already done that.
Yeah,
I'm
you've already
wondering,
done
is
that.
there anything
But that's what
more than that?
I think there was for not this year, but the following year. Is that right?
The $50,000 that was discussed was the initial $50,000 that was set aside for this year. So on page 22, the top of that page is the current fiscal year, and that's the $50,000 that the council asked to be set aside at the end of, or at the beginning of this fiscal year. As City Manager Hamburger discussed, we do bring the 22-23 fiscal year back generally in October timeframe, see how the year wrapped up, and that has been a time where additional appropriations are made, unless it's the council desire to make an additional appropriation now.
Okay, so we would look at that at the mid-year.
At the mid-year, or as you close the 22-23 year, around the October timeframe is when we know how we actually finished up, and a report is brought back to council to say this is what we projected and this is where we are. And then your next report is brought back in February, where you talk about if we're on course for the current fiscal year.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from council members? Any questions from staff or any comments from staff or comments from city council? No? All right. At this time, we will adjourn to the regular city council meeting at 6 p.m. on Wednesday, June 14th, 2023. Will the maker of the motion and a second to adjourn please state your names?
Councilmember Wolf, I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Councilmember Sylvester seconds.
Thank you. Now defer to the clerk for a roll call vote.
Councilmember Lopez.
Aye.
Councilmember Sylvester.
Aye.
Councilmember Wolf.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Buckley Weber.
Aye.
Mayor Anstead.
Aye.
Mayor Anstead, you have approval 5-0.
Thank you. This meeting is now adjourned.